The year is 1462. Europe is in a panic. The Ottoman Empire, a massive superpower that had just swallowed Constantinople, is hungry for more. Standing directly in their way is a tiny, miserable strip of land called Wallachia. It was basically a speed bump on the highway to Europe. Ruling this speed bump was a man named Vlad III, better known to his friends as Dracula, and to his enemies as that psycho with the stakes. History remembers him as a vampire, but if you look at the records, Vlad was actually just the world's most aggressive project manager. He took a country that was bankrupt, corrupt, and full of crime, and turned it into a military machine using a management style that involved zero HR complaints, because he executed the HR department. To understand why Vlad was so unhinged, you have to look at his childhood. When he was a boy, his father sent him as a hostage to the Ottoman Sultan to prove his loyalty. Vlad spent his teenage years as a prisoner of the very empire he would later fight. Essentially, he did a 10-year unpaid internship with the Turks. But instead of learning how to make coffee, he learned psychological warfare, torture methods, and how to terrify people. While his younger brother, Radu the Handsome, was busy charming the Sultan and becoming the teacher's pet, Vlad was in the corner taking notes on how to destroy his captors. By the time he was released and sent back to rule Wallachia, he wasn't just angry, he was educated, and he was ready to make it everyone else's problem. When Vlad took the throne, he found his country in a mess. The local nobles, called boyars, were corrupt, lazy, and had actually killed his father. They were the malware in his operating system. Vlad decided to host a team-building exercise. He invited 500 of these corrupt nobles to a massive Easter feast. They ate, they drank, they laughed. Then, just as dessert was being served, Vlad locked the doors. He asked them, "How many princes have you survived?" When they bragged about surviving dozens of rulers, Vlad realized they were the problem. He marched the older ones out to be executed immediately. The younger ones, he forced them to march 50 miles and build his castle until their clothes fell off and they died of exhaustion. He essentially fired the entire upper management of his country in one afternoon. Morale improved immediately. Vlad established a reputation for absolute order. He famously placed a cup made of solid gold in the middle of the town square and said anyone could drink from it, but no one could steal it. It sat there for years untouched because everyone knew Vlad's customer service policy was death. But the Ottoman Empire didn't take him seriously yet. They sent envoys to demand tribute, basically protection money. The envoys walked into Vlad's throne room and refused to remove their turbans, citing religious custom. Vlad smiled and said, "I respect your custom so much, I want to make sure you never lose it." He then ordered his guards to nail the turbans to their heads. He sent the envoys back to the Sultan with a note that basically said, "Return to sender." This was a diplomatic reply, all that started a war. The Sultan, Mehmed the Conqueror, was absolutely furious. He gathered an army of 150,000 soldiers, one of the largest forces the world had ever seen, and marched straight on Wallachia. Vlad, on the other hand, had 20,000 peasants and just a few horses. It should have been a complete slaughter. But Vlad knew he couldn't win a fair fight, so he decided rather boldly to rage quit the entire country. He initiated what he called Operation Scorched Earth. He burned his own fields, he poisoned his own wells, he evacuated the villages. And as the massive Turkish army marched north, they found nothing but ash, hunger and disease. Vlad essentially set his own house on fire, so the burglars wouldn't find anything to steal. It was honestly the ultimate, "You can't fire me, I quit" move. The Turks by this point were starving, thirsty and absolutely terrified. But Vlad, well, he wasn't done. On the night of June 17th, 1462, he decided to pull a bit of a prank. He dressed his best soldiers in Turkish uniforms and simply walked into the enemy camp in the middle of the night. His goal wasn't really to win a battle, he was hunting the Sultan. He wanted to cut the head off the snake. They rampaged through the camp, burning tents and causing absolute chaos. The Turks were so confused, they actually started attacking each other in the dark. Vlad's men killed thousands without losing barely anyone, and then vanished into the night before the sun even came up. It was, honestly, the historical equivalent of stream sniping. The Sultan spent the rest of the night hiding in his tent, wondering why on earth a peasant with a moustache was bullying him. Finally, the battered Ottoman army reached Vlad's capital, Târgovişte. They expected a siege. They expected, walls. Instead, they found the city gates just wide open. But before they could enter, they had to walk through Vlad's rather grim art installation. It was the forest of the Impaled. 20,000 bodies, Ottoman prisoners Vlad had captured, arranged on stakes for miles. The smell was horrific. The sight was honestly even worse. It was psychological warfare on a level nobody had ever seen before. The Sultan, a man who had conquered the unbreakable walls of Constantinople, looked at this nightmare and, well, broke. He famously said, "I cannot take a country from a man who does such things." He turned his massive army around and went home. Vlad didn't win by having more soldiers. He won by being, quite simply, the scariest person in the room. He eventually lost the throne to his brother, Radu the Handsome, who was basically the good cop to Vlad's bad cop. But his legacy was absolutely cemented. He proved that you don't need a massive budget or a huge team to defeat a giant. You just need absolute discipline, a total lack of fear, and honestly, a willingness to be completely, utterly unhinged. Vlad Dracula, history's greatest monster and its most effective troll.